thank you, mate, so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know as a serial entrepreneur, mate, you're always up to something new. Yeah, so how you been and what you been up to?
Oh, mate, yeah, thanks for having me, Nigel. Always happy to chat, as you know. I think at the moment it's just surviving this current cycle of capitalism, which is not without its challenges. It's definitely business has been on hard mode the last couple of years, but certainly a great learning experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I've been talking to businesses actually quite a bit on that point. It's been interesting, and obviously with the news that's been coming out of Israel and the Middle East and things, and there's actually a lot of software companies over in that area. So I had quite a few podcasts lined up, and they actually got cancelled because of what's
Got
going on.
drafted,
So
probably.
yeah, probably. Actually,
Yeah.
that's an interesting one. I never thought of that, but some of them were involved in, family members were
Mhm.
involved in what happened. And look, I mean, I don't like to get into politics, but we're all human at
Mm.
the end of the day,
Indeed, and,
So
and and it affects business, right? Like,
yeah,
if you think of the last few years, I mean, there's been nothing ordinary about doing ordinary business.
hmm
We had COVID. I mean, you could write dissertations on some of the challenges through business for that, particularly,
oh, for sure.
the ups and downs that the e-commerce sector had. That's for sure.
Mm.
Then you've had, the whole Ukraine situation. Now you've got this conflict in the
Yes.
Middle East,
Mm.
and then you've got some unique macros. So you've got inflation that's been high. But weirdly, you've had unemployment that's been low,
Yep.
and you've got obviously increasing interest rates. A nice little surprise this week in Australia. It's like they think we're all distracted with the horse race. Like, have another quarter. So
They always tend to do it like that, hold off, and then they wait for everyone to win some money. Yeah,
maybe
speaking on,
they're looking at TAB takings and go, yep, that's too high. We just need to slap you all on the wrist, guys. Data tells a story.
doesn't it? What? Yeah. Actually, that's a good segue, and I think it would be great to maybe start off about your early life, maybe, and then get into where you started. I mean, you've got such an amazing history of starting businesses, successful businesses, and you and I have known each other for quite a while, and I
I think it's
remember.
decades now. I hate to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
it.
probably, huh? It is. It's decades, right? And I still remember the young Carl walking in from Tumando that I'd never heard of before, and I thought, yeah, this sounds actually like an amazing product, and you started getting into it, and it was just so far in the future of what people needed. You really saw a need, and you filled that need so well.
I think
Maybe you can
we
talk
maybe
about
were
that a bit.
10 years too early there. But yeah, look, origin
Yeah.
story there. I think, for those that don't know, my university job, actually, I was in the early days of JB Hifi, and
Mhm.
this is pre-IPO JB. It had Macquarie come in, pump some cash. They just expanded their store count quite materially. And while doing a business degree, I got to watch, I guess, for all intents and purposes, a venture-backed business expand all through sort of .com one. And back when JB had a limited number of stores, people used to come in. I worked in the Brisbane City store, and people would come in from, I don't know, like Cairns, and say, "Oh, this TV's so much cheaper here. How much to ship it?" And we had this mythical piece of paper on the wall out the back, and that was our rate card. And all I can tell you is 9 times out of 10, if we charged the customer that number, it was wrong. And I just started thinking at the time, like, surely it can't be that hard to predict a cost of
Mm.
shipping, and apparently it was. And then after I finished uni, I worked for News Corp. Because I'd come from retail, they're like, you can have a retail portfolio. And I looked after a bunch of brands through .com one. And what most brands in Australia did was just copy what the Americans did, which was free shipping. Now, I can tell you a myriad of horror stories. My favorite was I had this local business that was selling couches and decided to do free shipping. And like, some of these first like sales were like regional WA, far north Queensland, and in some cases it cost more to ship the product than the product was sold for. Right? You think of these remote areas, heavy goods. You'd know that from your Bingley days, no doubt. Like, a fridge in Sydney is very different to a fridge in pick a remote postcode in the Northern Territory, right? Like, it's like, here's a kidney. Um, and I started thinking about just the unit economics of this, saying, this is a big problem, like, particularly for a country like Australia, where you have different companies that specialize in different things. You've got retailers that some of it have it easy if you sell t-shirts, but God forbid you're in electronics or something and you've got diversity, you've got everything from a toaster to a double door fridge, and you've got a lot of variables. And ultimately, if you bring it back to the customer experience and the customer journey, and this hasn't changed in 20 years, like someone comes to a website, they're in the checkout, there's this moment of truth. And if you give them the facts to make a decision, that's your chance to convert them. If you don't give them the information, and there's still retailers, I won't publicly shame them, that for certain bulky goods, for example, they'll just go call for a quote, and then they wonder why conversions are basically non-existent, because if you're not giving someone the information, the customer journey gets broken and drop-off is there. So the fundamental concept of Tomando was, the only shipping software that existed back then, where people were like doing label printing solutions for warehouses and stuff. We were like, well, how do we basically show a consumer what was possible at the time of a checkout, be able to sort of understand their choice, and then route that through to the through the supply chain and into the to the warehouse. So at dispatch, we can make sure that that promise is kept. And it was just, I think, trying to match consumer demand with the possibilities of logistics. And certainly back then, most of the courier companies, we would go through and say, talk about e-commerce and APIs and web platforms, and you could just watch their eyes glaze over, because these are like logistics purists that didn't have that. I mean, most couriers didn't even have an API. So the very early days, we were the technology partner. We brought them into sort of this first wave of e-commerce. Every time someone said, "Can you integrate?" they just flicked it to us, like it was, And then over time, they became more sophisticated. And I remember, the guys at Ozpost, when they were sort of launching their RESTful APIs, they chucked us the schema and go, "Can you give us some feedback?" And it's like, we'd done that before. We're happy to oblige, right? Because I like to think we were some of the spark that probably showed them where the potential is. And you flash forward a number of years now, and it's the most important growth driver for most courier companies. They've all figured out what they're good at, how to do it. Their offerings they have are rock solid. But had to start somewhere.
I mean, looking back to, for me, it was a solution to a problem. We had obviously a lot of orders coming in, and not really much in terms of options for shipping other than Australia Post. And Magento had no option for it, really. I mean, Magento as a platform just could not. It had a rules engine, and the rules engine was quite good. It was the first real e-commerce platform that had a decent rules engine. You get your bill at the end of the month, and you go into bill shock, because you're purely just either undercharging massively or you're overcharging. And as you say, as you overcharge, you then miss your conversions. You lose customers. So
the carpet did not match the drapes in most cases.
That's so true. Oh, fantastic. All right. Thanks. For those insights on. So just getting back to the, you saw a need, and you obviously you feel that need, but like, what got you into, like, how did you get started in the technology? I mean, obviously I looked at your profile. You've got a technical background. But how did you get started? Like, what, starting up the company and laying the foundations for what was essentially a takeover or a purchase by a multi-billion-dollar business. I mean, from the point of starting it and to the point of, that purchase, obviously there's a lot of IP that goes into it, and that's what the company pays for. You've built a lot of relationships over the time, but obviously you started somewhere. And did it just organically start to grow because you saw the need for the product was so great, and you just had the opportunity to present and cut into these retailers, essentially into these businesses? You were taking over essentially what was, in some instances, core to their business, which was freight. In some instances, like if we look at competitors to, say, for example, at the time, Big Brown Box, when we got talking, a very, very long time ago, but then Bing Lee, and then so on, most of these companies, they don't really realize they're actually technology companies, software companies that have a logistics side to their business. So getting back to that, how did you actually lay those foundations, get the right people into your business, and in a summary, sort of get it to a point where you knew you could scale?
Well, I've done this a few times now across multiple businesses, so I
Yeah.
might answer your question generically.
Mm-hmm.
So the advice is probably more constructive for people in terms of, being able to action it in their own businesses. So I think starting, let's just unpack that a little bit. And this is something I actually lecture on university a couple of times a year because, ideas are cheap. And execution is hard, right? The amount of time I see a founder that comes and goes, "Oh, I got the best idea. I want you to sign like 3 layers of NDAs." And I'm like, look, everyone's got ideas. In fact, whatever idea you're having right now, I can guarantee you there's probably 10 other people on the planet thinking exactly the same thing. But your
What the
ability to
TikTok
take
algorithm is.
yeah, exactly. But the ability to take an idea and sort of action it and sort of build scale around it, that's where the magic is. So for me, I actually think it starts with actually setting a big audacious vision, right? So I think with Tamando, we wanted to connect all the couriers of the world into a single platform and be this um, uh, gateway, if you like. And my co-founder of that business was someone that came from the aviation sector, and we saw I guess the analogs in the travel sector where, you had these booking systems like Amadeus and Galileo and those sort of things that effectively connected all the airlines and made code share possible and other bits and pieces. So there was a lot of those lessons I think that you could pick up and run with. Same thing now with Lyres, for example. Our vision of that business when we founded it was to change change the way the world drinks. And then, we're looking at the macro of people basically drinking less alcohol and getting healthier, and this whole health and wellness wave that sort of really exploded during COVID and is just anticipated. And if we could basically create a product that could, fill that void and give people optionality, as audacious as the vision sounds, it becomes possible. And you flash forward 4 years later, we're in 104 countries. Fun fact, we're in more countries than Tim Tams. Yeah, Austrade told me that. I thought it was hilarious. It's like, it's a nice little, thing to tell your mum or your grandma.
Yeah, 100% it is. It's amazing.
And,
Yeah.
I think we estimate we're served at like 80,000 bars, restaurants, and shops. Like it's just
Wow.
a phenomenal
That's
number,
incredible.
which is,
Yeah,
we'll unpack that a little bit in a while. But I think going back, so I think it's starting a vision because as an entrepreneur, and a founder, that's one of your things you must be able to do is you have to be able to bring people along the journey. Because the fallacy of entrepreneurship is it's one person that does everything. It's the most team sport thing you can possibly think of. Like it may take a founder to start, but it takes an absolute team to finish because in the early days, you will wear 10 hats and you'll be if you're a technical founder, you'll be the coder, you'll be the marketer, you'll be the CFO. For me, I've always found it better to do with friends. Like if you can have a yin and a yang. So in Tamando, I had a technical co-founder and an operational co-founder. And we split the pie, with Lyres, for example. I'm the commercial founder focused on the raising of the money and a lot of the business stuff. And then, Mark is the genius that put the liquids in the bottle. So, the product, I guess in a consumer sense, he's the technical co-founder because he's doing the physical product versus like cutting code. And Ono, Rudy's a PhD level org psych, right? So he brings the subject matter expertise, and I bring the ability on how to scale something B2B. So I think wherever you can have that yin and yang, it definitely makes it more sustainable. It's much harder as a sole founder, I think, than versus doing it at a potentially with a running mate. I've also seen the opposite of this, where you might have 4 or God forbid 6 found, like that just never works. It implodes. And simply put, it's just
gets too complicated.
Everyone's just built for different. It's like an endurance race. The analogy I mentioned at university about this is it's like you've decided to run a marathon and you haven't even gone for a run before or a jog.
No couch to 5K, nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Look, so you've got to convince, I don't know, 40, 50 people that running a marathon's a fantastic idea.
2 minutes in, everyone's dying.
Yeah, well, basically, and then you go, oh, kicker guys, it's all uphill. And then look, some people are going to drop out the 5K mark. Some people are going to drop out the 10K mark. Some people are going to drop out at the half mark. And you might out of that 50, you have a few people that make it to the end. But we're all just built for different levels and different stages. And also, I'd say this is true of founders. Like, I'm someone that is brilliant at starting, and give me the chaos, I thrive in it. It gets to a point of maturity where we're, managing single-digit increases on EBITDA. It's like, it's probably someone else's joy. Like, it doesn't give me joy. I like creating something out of nothing because it's a challenge, right? So I think back to that, it's just the vision is important, right? Ultimately, then it's about, okay, how do you start? I think it's about just starting to dissect that vision into actionable parts. There's some age-old wisdom that says people that write down goals and build plans are more likely to achieve them. That is absolutely, resolutely true. Because if you go, for example, I'll talk about raising capital, because that's one of the first things you might need to do. Where people fail, they go, oh, I need 5 million to start this venture. I'm going to go raise 5 million. Everyone will politely tell you to go away. But if you say, well, you're not going to need 5 million on day one. You might need, I don't know, 100 grand to build a prototype. But you might need, $1 million in seed funding to get started. The easiest way to kind of make a big goal like that is to break it into chunks. So if I look at the first million I raised, say for Tamando, it was like I did a first tranche that was 200 grand, which was like 4 checks of 50. And then there was another tranche that was 800K that I think was 4 or 5 people coming in for like, 200 each prox, right? And then before you know it, like, you've raised $1 million, and then you've got some fuel in the tank. You can build your revenue up. In that case, we built the revenue up to a sort of $1 million recurring. That's just a magic number where VCs start to care, because it's like you've proven some product market fit, which is what people want to see.
Yep.
And then you can go raise money. So we raised 5 mil in our Series A, which back then was a lot of money. Like, I should say, like, when we started Tamando, there was no venture capital, there was no Blackbird, there was no Airtree, there was no like industry, there was no startup meetups. God, LinkedIn was hardly even around. So I can tell you a story about, I had no clue what I was doing. I literally got the BRW one day, and it was like the Fast 50, I think it was, and just started ringing people because there was no LinkedIn. And I was literally just calling their switchboard and pretending I was returning their call and trying to get around their EA. I was like, oh, you'll know what my call's about. And I finally get him, and I'm like, look, I got through your gatekeeper. Here's what I'm doing. I don't want money. I just want advice. And funnily enough, most people just appreciated the hustle. And I'd say 50% of people gave me time, and 50% of people said, love to help. I'm just too busy, like, running a real business. But most actually were pretty forthcoming with their time. And it's something which has echoed in me, because I can tell you some experiences, like Damien, who was the CEO of iSelect at the time. Like, he literally lent me a CFO to do my first financial model, and then later on invested. The Greg Roebuck from Car Sales became one of my early investors, and was full of wisdom about how to build and scale something. So I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be here for today if it wasn't for some of those people paying their time forward. And that's something which has just echoed with me in terms of every venture I've done. I've just tried to find who's the smartest person in the room that I can go pick their brain on. And if they want to come on and invest, great. So Compono, which is my HR tech platform I founded, that's about, it's coming up in 5 years old, doing about sort of 15 million ARR. So it's a reasonable sort of size B2B business now. Before we even really got started was we got through one of our early investors connected with Andrew Banks, who's probably one of the most experienced operators in recruitment and HR. And he gave me a 15-minute phone call that turned into an hour and a half, and and basically ended up becoming an investor. And it's been a fantastic mentor. I've learned lots from him in a sector which I had really no experience in, apart from my own firsthand pain of growing a company with Tamando and trying to find the right talent, all around the world, which is really hard. Like, you typically talk to a CEO and says, what keeps you up at night? If it's not, your cash balance and raising capital, it's finding and keeping people, which was, I guess, the inspiration for that is, like, if we could build a platform that could, scour the world and for talent,
Mm.
bring a data-driven lens and help bring insights around skills, qualifications, and culture, and help make better hiring decisions. Or conversely, if you've got people in the business and you're looking to upskill them, the ability to sort of really give them learning pathways and micro-credential. Because for me, I think that's the best way to keep people. If you've got people in your business and you want them to stick away for 3 years, if they're a junior programmer and they want to be an engineering manager, you need to be thinking, right, how do you take them from where they are to where they need to be so they don't leave? And certainly there's some really well-funded tech companies that do that well organically, but I'd say that those capabilities for most businesses, they just don't have the in-house ability. And particularly with this whole, millennials and Gen Z, they want
100%.
career plans, right?
They do.
They're pretty much starting as an intern and go, cool, when can I be CEO?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and you got to believe in your people. I really do believe that you have to believe in your people, but there's a law of process, I believe, in which things go through.
You've got to earn your stripes, right?
You do, 100%. You do.
Yeah.
No, that's super interesting, Carl. Thanks so much for that. And it's interesting you say that you find somebody who has done what you're looking to do and sort of try and understand how they've gone about, and you just ask questions, isn't it? It's just so interesting.
I'll tell you what, I do I lecture at UQ a couple of times a year, and I always say at the end of a lecture, here's my details on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. Look, I sometimes take a little while to come back to you. I generally respond to most, not really salesy things, but if you're a student and you're saying, hey, I'd love to pick your brain about X, I'll make time, I'll make intros, right? And if I speak to 100 people, I reckon there's only one or two in any cohort that will ever reach out. And then, you kind of know that they've already sort of passed the first test in terms of hustle, because look, one of the things I say in that lecture is success in life is about luck and skill. So luck is being at the right place at the right time. So to be honest, if you're born in Australia, you've had the privilege of some education, you're already starting with some genetic lottery stuff going on, right?
100%.
I can give you probably 5 billion other people that aren't doing it as well as you. But skill is knowing what to do when you get some luck. So this can be, for example, you're on a plane, you sit next to someone, do you throw some chat and, see if some serendipity might be in your favor that day, or do you just keep watching your Netflix show? And I can tell you many a story where I sat next to someone in a plane or at a bar and I go, so what do you do? And they go X. And I'm like, as luck would have it. For example, I was at South by Southwest the other day and having a chat with someone, and it's like, what do you do? And they work for a company, and it was like one of our prospects actually for Compono. And I was like, of course you do, because that's just the way the universe works. And then you
it's so true, isn't it? I mean, people are so engrossed in their phones now today, Carl, too. I mean, they sit on a train or a bus or a plane, and they as you say, they're looking at Netflix or they're looking at their phone, and they just don't bother to start conversations. And I've done the same thing as you. I mean, I've started conversations on the plane and met some amazing people, interesting people, and it might not benefit you in business all the time.
Might be a cool story.
It's just a cool chat about something, or and you learn. It's all about life experiences, and I think you don't get it all from social. That's for sure. No. You've really got to. There's nothing that replaces humans.
No, 100%.
I think Bill Gates says he always says to anybody who sort of comes to him for ideas of a startup, he says, "Well, who's doing it well?" And, let's learn from them and see how we can potentially do it better,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the story of Lyres, right? We weren't first. We were actually second, but we're first to scale. So in that category, the first was a brand out of the UK called Seedlip. And it's a very different approach, where their approach was taking some old medicinal style sort of, recipes, gin adjacent, I guess you'd call it, as a category. Okay. But, did quite well in the early days. And we didn't even really know they existed because it didn't make it way down to Australia. But our thought was more thinking I was coming from a digital background. One of the first things I did, I was living in San Francisco, I moved back to Australia. The origin story of this was, I used to travel anywhere from 150 to 200 days a year.
Wow. And, gosh.
Again, everyone says, being a global CEO must be really fun. Fucking exhausting.
Yeah, I bet.
Just if you've got a global team, and particularly, this is pre-COVID, right? So there is just no remote working. I mean, when I sold the business, we sold to a French company that didn't really believe in doing anything on online. It was just like, no, you come to Paris to have this conversation. You're like, all right. So, I mean, could have spent a lot of time in Paris. I guess that was nice. But to be honest, towards the end of that, I was just exhausted. Like I was, probably the least healthy I've ever been, packed on the kilos. And it was just, honestly, you're just going from function to function, to client. You'd have a breakfast meeting, lunch meeting, dinner meeting, alcohol. And then I remember being in the UK and just sort of someone goes, do you want a beer? I said, I just want a water. And they're like, I thought you were an Australian.
Yeah, we've got a reputation around the world.
Does an Australian have to be a functioning
South Koreans
alcoholic?
are worse, though, I have to say. South Koreans, mate, they can drink you under the table.
I'll come back. There's another story. But it's just like, like, does an Australian have to be a funcking alcoholic?
Yeah, pretty much.
To be an Australian? And like, the answer was pretty much. And it got me thinking, I'm like, I wish there was a way I could go to a bar, just go, I'll get 3 gin and tonics, but make mine like a gin and tonic that's not a gin and tonic. Yeah. It's really funny. I was thinking about this. I came back and Mark, who's someone I went to uni with, he was working on these liquids. And I'm like, what's the idea here? He's like, I'm trying to make non-alcoholic alcohol. It's going to be the next big thing. And I'm like, I'll be customer number 1 for this, right? Like, I'm just so tired of having to go to a function and consume, right? Because the options is either a water or a high sugar Coke. And I do like a drink, like, I like a gin and tonic. I like an old fashioned, I like a Negroni, like an espresso martini. And none of the things on the market, back to the sort of the scaling topic, were actually sort of giving me the ability to do that. So being a digital guy, the first thing I did was go into Google Trends, and I'm just saying,
see what
are consumers searching?
Right?
Brain to keyboard. And they're basically like, is it possible to make a non-alcoholic espresso martini? Yeah. Is it, can I have a non-alcoholic Negroni? And I'm like, okay. So although there were some first movers in the category, they were kind of missing what consumers actually wanted, was the ability to consume the drinks they know and love, just in a different format. So we called it Lyres as a homage to the lyrebird, right? So nature's ultimate mimic. And being Australians, we wanted to have a nice little throwback to Australia for a heritage thing. We thought that was pretty cool. But also, it's a play on the word liar. So if you could go to a bar and go, can I have a Lyre's G&T? So it's like a little cheeky little
I love it.
secret.
Mate, it's so good. It's actually so Australian. And I originally, when I saw that, and I was looking at the marketing and the design and everything, and it's fantastic. I mean, I don't.
It's a cool brand.
Yeah, it's such a great brand, and the design of the bottles, they all got that real quality look about them. So you automatically assume like it's going to taste good. Like if I get this, it's going to taste good. And you've always got that sort of expectation that, it's not going to be as good as the original, but then you get it and you try it and you think, oh shit, hey, that tastes great. Yeah, that's delicious, So and I totally get what you're saying regarding the drinking, and I've been to a few luncheons now, and it is in the culture. It isn't in Australia's culture to drink, but honestly, you see every day something coming out about the effects of alcohol on the body. We had Dry July just not that long ago, and they're the effects on the body for alcohol. And I've actually stopped drinking alcohol, not completely, but during the week. And I was usually having 1 or 2, during dinner or a nice glass of wine.
1 or 2, exactly.
I had one yesterday. I was with Business Western Sydney and with the Minister of Procurement, and she was talking about just in general what's on the plan and the roadmap for businesses in Western Sydney. And, all the alcohol's coming out and, you enjoy a few, but then, about 3 o'clock, you start getting tired and you can't focus and you still got a lot of work to do. So I'll put some show notes in there after the show and where they can jump on. As you say, you pretty much can get it anywhere. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Carl, for talking about that. Maybe just, jumping back just to the whole career path that you've taken. And, as you said, you had no idea about recruitment, but you saw a need there and you knew there was, being a digital guy, there was data involved and so on. And, what would you say would be some of the sort of bigger sort of challenges that you've faced? Is it the funding side? As you say, is it, I know you said it's the team, keeping a team together that's laser focused, all pointed in the same direction during that point in which you're starting to scale, because they're the ones that get you over the finish line essentially and start getting you to a point of where potentially, you're no longer talking to the early adopters and the innovators. You're now in the early majority, potentially, of consumers in the market. If we think about the law of diffusion of innovation, it's interesting because there's always something that that when I talk to CEOs and so on, they say there was this point. Is there anything you can put your finger on that sort of, was a big challenge, the biggest challenge you've had so far, and how you got over it?
Look, I'd just say overall, probably the thematic is people, right? I'd just say some of the challenges you have generally in building your own company is everyone would have at least made this mistake at least once, which is hiring the wrong person. And I'd say that there's not necessarily right or wrong people, but there's people that might be right for you at the right time and wrong for you at the right time. I made a definitely. I mean, this is probably where the foundation of Compono came from. Was once we had our Series A, we had VC came in. They started saying, "Well, hire these different roles," and you end up hiring, which on paper looks amazing. You're like, "Oh, this person." It comes from a blue. Look at the companies they work for, all blue chip. They got a Stanford MBA. Like, you get enamored by what's on it, but the scary part is what's not on a resume, right? So I made this one bad hire, and a week into it, I'm just going to my board saying, "This is not going to work. This guy's not a cultural fit." And they're like, "Oh, you're young. You're being brash. Just give it time. It'll settle down." 3 months later, like, "Can you please fire this person?" Right? And it was just someone that had come from a large company that their view of executing. We were a 50-person team then. Was just to hire lots of people. And again, if you come from a big, well-resourced multinational where there's unlimited budget for these things, I mean, that's how you execute. But it's not in a lean startup where you've got to be the player coach, right? You've got to be able to get your hands dirty but still kick the ball, right? So that's a very different thing. And then when I went over to San Francisco, I had the complete polar opposite of this, where I was the vanguard, right? I said, I'll go over and do it myself because, back to the one-person army type of scenario.
Yep.
But the challenge in a market like there at the time, again, this is pre-COVID, where it was still a very shiny diamond versus, what's happened a little bit post-COVID. But you're going head to head with the Googles and the Facebooks and the Apples, and they've got unlimited budget, right?
It's
and
huge.
I can tell you some stories in terms of some of these interviews. I remember this one guy comes in and he goes, "What's on the menu each week?" And I said, "We're a team of 10. We don't have a chef."
There is no menu, bro. Just go down the shops and get a burger.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And this guy goes, "Oh, look, if that's the case, this one's probably not for me. I don't want to use my own money on food." And you're like, wow. But that was the wave of entitlement, just a few years ago, right? I mean, that was where the expectation of tech workers in the Bay Area were. And I was like, is this like, am I being pranked? Is like Ashton Kutcher going to jump out and go, "Gotcha"? No, this was a real experience. I was like, wow. And then I had some great experiences with, I started to go way further down the talent pool. And then, sometimes it'd be like a really cool cover letter or something. Can I give them an interview? And I was like, there's something here. But by then, what I'd done is another guy I went to university with, Rudy, who's my co-founder of Compono. I was using him to do psychometric testing. So I'm like, tell me everything not on the resume. Because ultimately, if you've made a bad hiring decision, I mean, for me, if I make any mistake, I'm like, how do I learn from it and not do it again? Because mistakes are fine. Like, it's okay to fail. And I mean, that must be something we get better in Australia. Like, you will.
I agree.
You will fail. You will make mistakes.
There seems to be a sort of like a
tall poppy and
tall poppy, and then there's sort of like you're stained with it for a little bit, and then I don't agree with that.
No,
I mean, I know
honestly,
from my early Click Frenzy days, Grant, Peter, and I started that, and obviously
few
it
server
crashed.
issues back in the days.
It crashed, and I remember Peter Crederis and I were on the plane, and we were coming into the airport, and it was on the TV screens they have on the planes.
Yep.
And we're coming into land into Sydney, and they were talking about how Click Frenzy had crashed. And we're on this plane coming into land. I'm thinking, fuck, I hope the plane doesn't crash.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, totally. We don't seem to accept, we tend to think, oh, fail forward, fail quickly. But I think from a C level down, they want to try and accept it, but they don't truly actually accept
Yeah,
it.
100%.
Yeah.
So I think just to capstone this one, so I ended up, so tapping Rudy in saying, all right, like, how can, I basically just not make a bad hiring decision again. So started to use psychometrics, just bring a bit more data into the process. And look, I had some people I hire, which if you looked at the resume, they would be the wrong person. I had this one guy, he was like, medically discharged from the Coast Guard, just wanted to get a start working for a tech company. And then but all the psychometrics was basically like, look, high emotional intelligence, high abstract reasoning, basically every marker that says can turn this person into a sales superstar. So then 2 years later, he's my number one sales guy. And then when I was coming back to Australia, Nick was bringing Afterpay out, and I made an intro to Nick, and he was like, "Are you sure, Carl?" I'm like, "Yeah, just give him some options or something, because if it vests, like, he's really hungry." And he did. He became a top performer at Afterpay. So ultimately, that's something to think about in terms of who you hire can make or break the business, quite literally. I mean, I can tell you stories where people have hired the wrong person. It's literally killed the business. So
Yeah.
I think just being able to bring a data-driven approach in to who's coming through the funnel, that's certainly what the Component platform does. And then once you've got people in, then you have to understand what is your current culture versus your desired culture. Where are people's engagement levels? Where are people's aspirations? Are you aligned? Because if you do that a couple times a year, data tells a story. So if you think that, hey, we're innovative and we're fun and we're empowering people, and the data comes back and says, actually X in this department is micromanaging and everyone hates life, you've got a ticking time bomb, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
you either have to coach the manager and show them through data, hey, you're not aligned to what people want in this organization, or you basically have to, you're going to have to remove that person, because it's just going to be like oil and water. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for that. It's couldn't agree more. And obviously you've got a lot of experience in doing that. And I hope the audience spends a bit of time and as they're scaling, think about that massively. I mean, I'm just starting up in my own startup, but my goal for my business is not to become, some global international superstar. It's just to empower businesses and talk to businesses and help. And as you said, you've got to have that why. You've got to be able to bring them along the journey, and you've got to hire people, as you said, that believe in your journey with you and have the right sort of, that internal kind of drive and spirit that actually gets them to want to believe in your mission as much as you do. And it's so hard to find those people, but when you do, you hold on to them with everything you can.
100%. And it goes back to that vision thing I said at the start, right? Because when you look at the most effective teams around the world, so I'm talking high-performing sports team, military special forces, like if you look at like the textbook examples, there's a very clear understanding between vision and mission. So the vision might be like achieve the objective. The mission is like how we're going to do it. And then everyone in that team knows how they play their part. So if you think of a sports team, which is probably an easy one for listeners to do, like in a team sport, if you're the winger, that's your role. If you're the center, that's your role. And if everyone plays their role, the team works well. As soon as people, you're only strong as your weakest link. As soon as someone is not playing their part, then the whole team can fail, right? And then if you look at, like World Cup soccer, for example.
Yeah, 100%.
The team that always wins plays as a team, and there's not a dependence on a superstar. And as soon as there's a dependent superstar, it's like every year you see it with, like, you've got like Neymar in Brazil, and it's just
Ronaldo
becomes
with
like
Man United.
Exactly. And the strategy is like crush that person. Because if they're broken, it's like the team becomes demoralized. Where, I don't know, you look at the German or the Spanish teams most years, and it's like, you know what? It's like if one goes down, another sub comes on, and they're just as good, like, because they play as a team. Right?
Yeah,
they don't get overshadowed by that.
That's such a great analogy, Carl. I mean, I coach actually NPL.
Oh, there you go.
Under 16s, as well. And I'm coaching summer soccer at the Western Sydney Wanderers ground, and we're coming first in under 13 boys. And it's actually, to see it, it's where it starts, in fact. And this is why I think team sports are so important, because, just recently I had one boy who kind of stormed off at the end of the game because he didn't get a few minutes on. I didn't put him on, but we had an understanding before we started the game that he wouldn't go on, or we wouldn't make any changes until we had enough of a gap to know that we would win the game, because we're playing to win. And it's sort of, when I think about it, as you said, I made one substitution, and it was because every time that person went out, they were just, the other team was trying to destroy that person. I mean, hard challenges, hard kicks, and I took him out, swapped him out, and the other person that came on scored a goal straight away. And as you say, as soon as you find somebody who's in your business that could be an amazing person on paper, but doesn't actually kick the goals and score the goals for you, and then run back and cheer the rest of the team on and whatever, and just takes it on and personally and just walks on, then they're clearly not a team player. And as you said, it's so vital to the success of the overall outcomes of the business or the team that it's incredible. Awesome, mate. Thanks so much for that. I think I don't know. We could probably move on a little bit. Maybe we could get into actually. We've spoken a bit about the success factors. We've spoken a bit about you having that entrepreneurial spirit. As you say, you've got an idea, you see a need, you feel a need, and I think moving on from that, we know sort of what the key sort of successful factors in a business is for the audience listening. You've got to be able to scale. You've got to be able to find the right people. You've got to be able to attract the right talent who believe in your vision. We mentioned the failures of business, and we touched on that. Let's just touch on that just for a little bit for the audience. And as I said to you, I think a lot of CEOs tend to not talk the talk but not walk the walk, in terms of being able to say, yeah, you can fail, but fail quickly and move on, and as long as you're moving forward, everything is fine. What are your thoughts about that in Australia? Essentially, you've come from, you've been around the world, you've set up businesses around the world, you've seen the different cultures. I've worked for a French company previously. I worked for Decathlon, and I can see they have a very different approach to HR, which in my mind is very, very challenging.
Oh yeah,
in Australia. Very challenging.
The French, like, seeing that firsthand, it's unique. It's like,
yeah.
Well, I think this becomes back to the incentive structure, right? Because the French model is they have very high tax, and but they have an amazing retirement plan, because you're getting like 80% of your final salary for your rest of your life, and it's uncapped, right? So you have wealth tax and all sorts of sort of things that really punish you if you're an entrepreneur, or you're making money through accumulating capital. So there, it's like, get a good company, stay there for 20 years, wait for your boss to retire, take their job, and then make sure your final pay is awesome, and then retire as soon. And that's why if they talk about raising the pension age,
you're absolutely spot on, bro.
Yeah, I mean, look, last year they were talking about raising the pension age from 65 to 67 or whatever it was.
Yeah, riots.
And it was riots. I mean, we're talking like Molotov cocktail style riots. Yeah. They're like, no, because again, it's like the whole thing is work.
Yeah.
Do okay, and then just enjoy your retirement, and then you retire the day you can, and you're getting a nice paycheck. I mean, you look at what the pension is in Australia. I mean,
can't pay your electricity bill.
You can't pay, like, pretty much. I mean, most people need supplement, income from their kids, right? Because otherwise they can't make ends meet because of cost of living. And then, our generation, I mean, do you think the average person actually has enough in super? I think you talk about a mortgage cliff. I think we're going to have a super cliff, because I don't think there's, like, what happens if you don't retire with enough super, right? Like, I think that's something which the next generation is really going to come into it. So that'll be one to watch with our aging, population, right? So I think, going back to your question, I mean, there's a few things you touched on there. I mean, one, it's probably failure, and then I guess how to sort of avoid it. I'd probably say, like, one of my biggest failures in my first startup was, like, just, really not doing good work-life balance. Like, I think your first startup, you've got something to prove. You work yourself to the bone. You forgo health. Randy Zuckerberg, who's Mark Zuckerberg's sister, has this, this very famous quote where it's like, work, family, friends, sleep, exercise, pick 3, because that's all you're going to have time for. She's 100% right.
Oh, she is. Yep.
I think that there's it becomes easy to sort of like forego exercise and our health. I think as you start to meet really accomplished entrepreneurs or people that have been through that gauntlet the first time, it's probably the one thing you shouldn't, because your mind is only as good as your body, and if you don't get some sort of work-life balance, you will burn out, right? And burnout's
Mm.
becoming a very real thing. Mental health is becoming increasingly something that we just need to talk about, because I mean, suicide rates are too high, particularly in entrepreneurship, because I
Mm.
mean it's crushing for a lot of people at the moment. And that goes back to thinking, I failed. There is no other option. I mean, there's a myriad of cool stories we can talk about where people have failed. I mean, one of the ones I like to talk about is like Michael Fox with Shoes of Prey. I mean, unfortunately, that
Oh
didn't
yeah,
make
she's a
it.
prey.
Like
Yeah.
he's round the roundabout again with Fable, doing
Mm.
in an adjacent category to what I'm doing with Lyres,
Mm.
plant-based meat, and doing really well. So
Mm.
sometimes,
Reinvent
you know,
yourself, basically. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
100%. And
Mm.
I get it, because when you do start a business, it is your whole identity, and whether you get an exit away, or whether it fails, it almost doesn't matter. But it's just about, I think, just thinking about yourself and how to be the best version of yourself, and just carving out enough time to do that. And if that means prioritizing family for you to do that, if it's exercise,
Mm.
for me, it's like the first time I probably stopped, because I probably traveled at least 100 days a year for my whole career, and I got to COVID, and basically there was just zero travel, and
Yeah.
I was like, what am I going to do with all this extra time? And particularly when it was like Zoom call after Zoom call, I was just going
Mm.
crazy, because I'm,
Oh,
I'm, I'm an extrovert, right? So,
yeah. You want to be
um,
with people.
yeah, so I just
Mm.
started exercising, and then it's just like pretty much wake up, train, or like do some calls, train.
Mm.
Sometimes it was just other things, and then before you know it, I was going to physio, and it's like, okay, so how much are you running? I'm like, I did like 30K last week. Like, how much you normally run? I'm like, zero. And like, you can't just do that. It's like, maybe take up biking. I'm like, okay. And so started
Mm.
cycling, back to the physios, next is ITB, glute med, and they're like, okay, what are you doing? Running, I'm cycling. I'm like, all right, well, put some cross training in. And then it's like, oh, I can do. I'm not a bad swimmer. Maybe I'll do a triathlon. And it just starts snowballing. And
And you
then it
feel
gets,
good. I mean, you
yeah,
feel good, right? I mean, it's
100%.
a whole EDSO thing, right? Endorphins and
Yep.
dopamine
I
and
was just
serotonin,
drinking it. And
oxytocin. You get everything, really.
well, it's something in like all my companies now are remote first, right? And
Mm.
it was over during COVID. I was getting everyone on Strava, and we were like competing, and but also like it's just I think last year I was in the top 1% of people on Strava in terms of being active. Which, if you knew me in my early days, was like the opposite of that. But
Yeah.
it's just I literally wake up every day, look at the weather, and go, cool. Like, I'm doing my morning calls with the US, and then I might jump on the bike, and then I might do some few more calls, and
Mm.
it's going to be a windy afternoon. I might go for a kite surf, and then I'm doing calls in Europe, and you actually start to think about the concept of output over
Yes.
hours, right?
Yes.
Because there's so much research that says people go into an office environment 9 to 5, and they probably produce 3 to 4 hours of productive work in an
So
8 hour
true.
day, because they're going for coffee, they're having
Yep.
chats. So just because someone's in the office doesn't mean they're more productive. Now,
Yeah.
I personally think the future of work, like offices, have a really important nexus to bring people together when you're doing strategy planning. I think we're going to go to the world of on-sites versus off-sites, right? If we're
Mm.
doing remote first. But to be honest, I think if you're mid-career, you know what you're doing, you know how to execute, you can do that from anywhere.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's so
if you
true.
know what your job is. But
Mm.
I think the trade-off, if you like, is young people that haven't had that mentorship, the water cooler moments. You don't get that
Yes.
unless you have an office. So
Yeah. That's
if I
right.
look at Lyres, for example, what's worked really well is we've hired everyone mid-career. They've had 10 years of doing their job somewhere else. They know what to do. So,
Mm.
you give them really understandable KPIs, and people go execute. If you were sort of building something from scratch, there would be an absolute advantage. Like using AI, there would be a lot of advantage being in a cluster where you can sort of just bounce off ideas.
Mm.
Whether that's sort of all your own people or with other people doing the same thing, like some of those sort of serendipitous interactions is what fuels a lot of growth, like personal growth, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah. Totally.
um, but I think ultimately it's about, like if you look at really high performing people, they understand that, what does the business need from me to perform, and how do I execute that?
Mm.
Versus necessarily like, oh, what am I going to do I've got to be there at 8:01, otherwise I'll get in trouble. Like,
Mm.
I think that, I mean, people would call me and when we started, it's like, oh, I've just got to take my kids to school. I'm like, why are you telling me this? It's just do it. I trust you. Just,
Mm.
we all
Yeah.
have a life.
Yeah,
um,
that's it.
if it means if the most effective time of day is from 9 p.m. when your kids are asleep and you get left alone for 2 hours and you're going to smash out 2 hours, do it. Like,
Yeah.
do what is best for you, right? And if it
Mm.
gives you joy to see your family in the day, find time for that, right? Like, and
Mm.
I think all employers should have a flexible viewpoint and then just focus it on what matters, which is outputs, KPIs, make sure it's measurable. I mean, the counter argument to this is if you aren't measuring performance and expectations from people, then you're setting yourself up to fail.
Mm.
Like, that goes back to what I said at the start, like vision, mission, actionable, chunks. Everyone knows that, okay, my budget is X. I have to produce this by this date. Like, and then it's measurable. So if someone's, taking the piss on it, like,
Mm.
either they're not good at the job or they're lying. Like,
Yeah, no,
data tells the
totally
story,
agree.
right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not reading someone else's homework, while they're in the office. Yeah, no, that's so true. Amazing, Carl. That's really good advice. And I think, just thinking that what you said about, so many times I've been in the Qantas Business Lounge and seen overweight businessmen, and I'm carrying a few extra kilos myself, right? And I think to myself, it's about time. And actually this year, and you spoke about mental health as well. And this year, I actually spent the beginning of this year just trying to get myself through a few things that happened, in the past. Um, and I found the only way that heals that is time, time with the people you love, time with your family, time doing the things that make you feel happy. And it can be work. I mean, like I would do work and I'd feel productive, and there's nothing better than doing something and feeling productive. Uh, you feel like you're working towards a goal that it makes sense. And I have this saying that sometimes people think that their body is just a transport for their brain, but in actual fact, if you don't look after that body, as you said, then when it comes time for output, you're feeling sluggish, you're feeling hungover from the breakfast, champagne or something, or, you're just not feeling good. And
Well, the second highest cluster of neurons after your brain is in your gut, right?
yeah,
So gut
yeah,
feel, real thing.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's awesome. All right, going back to your experience in e-commerce, and you've dealt with so many successful retailers, and I think this is where you've taken what people have failed with, what the key learnings have been. Sometimes I say in business, it's not always about what works; it's always about understanding what hasn't worked. It's just as important. So you got to focus on the positive and the yin and yang, as you mentioned. And you've seen it all pretty much, you're dealing with all of these businesses, these startups, these e-com startups and things. But, there's obviously an outlook, which everybody has on e-commerce. And we saw the big COVID boom that we had, so post COVID, everybody was struggling to get, the numbers they were getting during COVID because, stores were shuttered and so on. And the people who would not normally shop online have started shopping online. And I was just recently talking to a very large grocery chain about going online and so on. What do you see is sort of like the next 5 to say, I mean, Basil sort of says 1 year is 7 years in retail for e-commerce. So I would say 5 years, not 10. But what's your outlook for, say, the next 5 years in e-commerce, and where do you really think it's headed?
Oh, look, I think it'd be remiss of me if I didn't mention all the cool stuff that's coming with generative AI. I mean,
Mm.
that's super interesting. Look, I would say AI has the ability to give superpowers to e-commerce in terms of it can
Yeah.
probably write content better than you. It can do things with your images better than you can employ someone. I mean, if you look at some of the new like Adobe things. I mean, you probably remember when you had to do like photo shoots and stuff for physical products, and you got to go etch backgrounds and all some of the things.
Yeah. Deep etch and
Now you can literally just go, give me a person on a beach with a sunset. No, make it more light, make the lighting more ominous. Like you can just, and it just does it. It's just phenomenal. And you look at some of the other tools like Midjourney and some of these other ones that are coming out in terms of just dubbing other languages, conversational. There's just so many like use cases that it's almost overwhelming. There's also lots of noise, but
there is, isn't there?
So the way I look at AI is, can it take something that is already happening and do it better, right? Or can it enhance something we already have? I don't think it replaces a lot of things. I think it either makes the art of doing it more efficient, like, imagery is a great example. It might alleviate some of the costs, say, like, some of the stuff coming into chatbots and conversational intelligence is super cool. And then I think you look at some of the actionable sort of use cases in terms of using it to better understand, like, things like meta tags and SEO, because it's often that's done quite static. And if you can start to do that quite dynamic, understanding how trends change every month, right? And just constantly do that.
Absolutely.
But so I'd say that's probably the first macro trend. I think the second is, we're in the time of social influencers. Your marketing mix, if you are thinking about it in a traditional sense, is probably wrong, right? There is nothing that is more cost effective than digital. And I think the second wave of that is, as I think about consumer, I'm having more and more experience in consumer now. It's like, honestly, like I could create a factory that pumps out products, and it's just like literally take a cool product, put some cash in it, find an influencer, and then use that to drive demand to the zenith, right? Now, so if you're doing your own products, like the role of celebrities and influencers, what they can do from a bang for buck perspective. There's some amazing examples you can see over the last couple of years. I don't know if you've seen the Feastables chocolates with Mr. Beast.
Yeah,
that is a phenomenal size business now, right? But you take someone that knows how to do product with someone that has a captive audience on YouTube. 1 + 1 equals like 200 in that example. Not to spoil for some prizes, we'll have a big announcement on the Lyre side around this next week. So we'll watch this space. But certainly that's it's something I've been experimenting with a bit over the last 12 months, and I think it really gives you a way as a brand. So this is more relevant for those that are building their own products, building brands, and I'd say anything I'm doing with at a product level or a brand level now, you just got to think about how can you use people of prominence. I don't want to say celebrities or influencers. It's more people that have reach
and audience.
So I'd say people of prominence to build awareness and advocacy for your brand, right? Because that's ultimately what you want them to drive. Because there's also bad examples of this where someone endorses something and it's just not authentic. But to bring someone into the tent as like a co-entrepreneur. So there's some great examples out there. One that I think is relevant is like On Running. I don't know if you know the brand On. It's like running shoes. They've done such an amazing job as a retailer, and definitely check out their site and how they do their storytelling, because they have all these sponsored athletes, and it's every athlete telling this story. And for some sponsored athletes, it's like they give them a pair of shoes, right? Like it's not like they're giving them cash. Others, they're definitely going to have more robust commercials and paid posts and stuff like that. But then the other end of the scale, they got Roger Federer. So this is a Swiss brand. By the way, if you don't run with On shoes, give them a go, and your knees will thank you. It's the science backs it up as well. It's like it's like this. It's like if you're running on road, it's like the same as running on a treadmill in terms of softening impact on your knee. So your knees, like there's a lot of science that backs it up. That's why they've been so popular. But to go back to the celebrity thing, they had Roger Federer come in as an investor and a co-creator, and then he's like, let's make awesome tennis shoes. So you actually have someone that backed it because he was Swiss, they were Swiss, and then pushed them into a new category, This is a public company, it's listed over in the US, but it's been a really cool brand to watch because this is someone that, and hopefully this is relevant to listeners. I mean, if you think about it, you've got Nike, you've got Asics, you've got some dominant Reebok, you've got all these
the
big
incumbents
brands,
are huge,
billion-dollar companies, and then you've got this strappy little startup, called On, that started from pretty much nothing in Switzerland, got a bit of venture, built a digital-first strategy, built some relationships with athletes. The athletes authentically said, "I've switched to this brand and it's great." And then they went on from there, and then culminated with someone like Roger Federer. But like they haven't actually had someone. He didn't overshadow the brand, and many times you're bringing a celebrity in and they become the brand, and then if the celebrity deal stops, the brand dies because that is their whole identity. And I just think they executed this in such a. And if you click on the Roger, for example, there,
such a nice site too.
Yeah, like his shoes, it's really well done. They're constantly refining it with colors and technology, and they're backing it up with science. Like it's a really, really good example, because you would think this is a David v. Goliath. Like, how could a brand build billions of dollars of scale versus an incumbent that is entrenched? And the answer was basically cool product, great brand, using celebrities and people of prominence to endorse the product and educate and make it authentic. That creates viral word of mouth. And then they then sort of went up as they got more scale, and then the economics with someone like a Federer would make sense. And the whole time they built this whole brand D2C, right? So it's only now, since they become a big $1 billion sort of public company, do you start to find these shoes in like Athlete's Foot and that. It was pretty much 100% D2C up until a few years back. So
I noticed a lot of people started wearing them.
Really
like,
cool example.
Yeah, like with coming from where I came from, I would see a lot of people coming in who were in the running space into the store, and I saw the logo is actually really quite unique. And at the base of the shoe is so unique that they stand out. And that's the other thing too, isn't it? Sort of self-perpetuating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is I don't have any fiduciary interest in this company, but absolute fanboy. And then we've certainly taken a lot of inspiration from that. That's one of the best consumer examples of a digital first that's gone global, really owned the US as well. And look, if I speak to any professional athlete that's not sponsored by another brand, they're pretty much wearing On. Like it's that noticeable.
Yeah, well, I noticed that you guys actually partnered with Weight Watchers.
Yeah, we do. So when I say
Lyres.
people of prominence, we find different partners to hit different demographics and create awareness. Like Weight Watchers is a great example, because one of the things about Lyres is we're really low calorie, right? We're not no calorie, but we're ultra low calorie in most cases. So just doing something simple like swapping your daily alcoholic drink for a Lyres. So I'll give you an example. Like a traditional Negroni might have 300 calories. You can make a no-groni, so make it with Lyres, and you're sub 100, right? So it may not sound like much, but if you're particularly, that's why the Weight Watchers example is quite because if you don't understand calories and whatnot, just to make it into points, right? Like being able to sort of educate consumers and say, hey, if you are looking to cut out, I mean, probably the biggest thing if you ever want to lose weight, you just cut out the booze, because it's empty calories.
Yes, so, well, I did that. I lost 6 kilos in 2 weeks.
Yep, it's that simple.
Although I was definitely over my weight limit, but yeah, you're so right, and it's hard. It is so hard. You want to replace it with something. Humans have that connection. Like there's an association with things they do during the day. They sit down, they have dinner, they have a glass of wine. I think we might wrap it up there, mate. And look, I really, really appreciate your time coming on the show. Hopefully you can come back on the show next year when we we've got quite a few guests coming on next year, but I'm looking to do continue to do the podcast every week. Now, I for every guest, I like to give them some merch, and I know you used to have some amazing merch at Commando, and I remember Fran used to give me some really cool stuff. But I've got these new shirts.
Very cool.
If you can see that there. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you one of these shirts. Now, you can only get them from being a guest on the show, this particular design. So now it comes in white and black. So you tell me what size you are and what color. And I've also got one of these amazing mugs. All right. So I'll give you one of these as well. And look, Matt, again, I appreciate your time so much. And I really hope, and I know the audience will thoroughly enjoy hearing your journey, about your journey, and I'd love to have you back on the show again in the future, mate.
Me, Nigel.
Thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Carl.
mate. Bye.